All right. Hi, everyone. Welcome to this month's Portals Community Call. I'm Jason Gumpert from MS Dynamics World. Always pleased to be here for these events on a monthly basis. We have a great one for you today. Um, as we get started, just a couple of notes, and then I'll hand things over to our presenters. First, please feel free to ask questions. We'll be watching the questions block as we go here, as usual. And we're also recording today's event, so we'll be making that available after the session ends. With that, I think we are ready to get started. I'm going to hand things off to Nick Hayduk to take us forward.
All right, thank you very much, Jason. Yeah, we got a very fun, interesting call today where we're going to be talking about plugins with Power Pages, and a lot of the content will cover everyone's favorite topic, which is caching. Yeah, excited to have our guest presenter, Jacob Chapman, back to present for us again. So let's kind of get through the usual stuff here, and then we'll get to Jacob. Quick introduction in case this is your first time joining us. My name is Nicholas Hayduk. I'm the president and software engineer at Engineered Code Consulting Inc., based here in Regina, Saskatchewan, Canada. I'm a Microsoft MVP, and I've been working with the Power Pages product for I guess maybe it's close to 15 years now, since 2009. My career began at ADX Studio, the company that originally built the Power Pages product and was acquired by Microsoft in 2018, I guess, or 2015. Sorry, 2015. Um, so if you're not already connected with me on LinkedIn, please feel free to do so. You can also follow us on Twitter or X. Um, we have our blog and YouTube channels. Our blog we put out about once a month. Our YouTube channel, we've got our weekly tips. We post these community calls. We've also got our podcast that I do with George Dubinsky down in Australia. That's available at crm.audio. We do have some new episodes of that coming out here soon. Yeah, please feel free to, if you're looking for Power Pages content, a lot of different options there. Um, as always, just want to say thanks to Jason and the entire MS Dynamics world for their support on these community calls for the last 50, I think for 52, 52 maybe now. Like there's been a lot of them. I think we've been doing them since 2020. There's been a few, and yeah, his help has been integral to this, helping us, manage the calls, get the word out, all that sort of stuff. So thanks to Jason and the entire team at MS Dynamics World. In terms of our agenda, we're going to, stick with the usual agenda. We'll talk about what, if any, portal news there are. Then we'll get into today's topic, which again, we've got guest presenter Jacob Chapman with us today, who will be talking about plugins with Power Pages. Then we'll talk about the date and time of our next Portals community call, which is a little bit different. I'll just warn you, due to the Power Platform conference, we want to kind of change around so we weren't conflicting too much with that big event that's happening in the Microsoft Power Platform space, and just due to kind of other scheduling conflicts, we've got a little bit of a different date and time for it. And then, as always, we'll leave some time for Q&A, whether it's about today's topic or any other kind of Power Pages, Dynamics 365, Power Platform, portals, all that sort of stuff. Open to any of your questions using that question block, as Jason mentioned. All right, so why don't we talk about all of the exciting news that has happened since we last joined up here in July, and the answer to that is there has been none. So that's not totally surprising. I feel like we're back in the days of 3 or 4 years ago when there could have been months without any news. Um, Honestly, in August or July, things quiet down. Microsoft started a new fiscal year. Last month we had the release wave notes, so that kind of gave us something to talk about, as well as there are a few kind of things on the blog, but there hasn't been a blog post from the product team since the announcements of the release of some of the file enhancements. So again, I think some people there might be on some well-deserved time off, and so nothing new to report in terms of portals news. No new features that I'm aware about there. So quiet month for news, and so yeah, hopefully people have gotten some good vacation in during these kind of quieter times. So that leads us right into our topic. And again, our topic today, we've got guest presenter Jacob Chapman, one of the members of the engineered code team here in Regina. He's presented for us in the past, and so we're really happy to have him back. He chose a topic that is plugins with Power Pages, something that's definitely more on the pro code side. But yeah, lots of interesting nuances. So whether you're kind of an experienced Power Pages developer or an experienced plugin developer, hopefully what Jacob will present to you here will, kind of give you some information that will help make your life a little bit easier when it comes to building plugins with Power Pages. So I'm going to hand it off to Jacob and see here, make him presenter. And Jacob, yeah, welcome and thanks for joining us today.
Awesome. Thank you, Nick. Appreciate it. Happy to be here. I'm going to be presenting the topic of DataVerse plugins and Power Pages. I'm very excited to present you this topic. And in today's session, we'll be exploring how these two powerful technologies, plugins and Power Pages, can be integrated to create dynamic, high-performing applications. So we'll be diving into the intricacies of plugin execution, the challenges posed by caching on Power Pages, and how to overcome some of these challenges to ensure that your users always have access to accurate, up-to-date information. So, whether you're familiar with writing plugins or working with Power Pages, hopefully this presentation will help bridge the gap between those two areas, providing you with a comprehensive understanding of how they interact and how to optimize their use together. So by the end of the session, you'll have the tools and knowledge to confidently implement and manage plugins in a way that enhances the overall user experience on Power Pages. So let's get into it. Before we dive into any details, let's take a moment to clarify who this presentation is for and what we aim to achieve today. This session is designed for two key audiences. First, for those of you who are already experienced in developing DataVerse plugins, but might be new to Power Pages, this presentation will help you understand how your plugins can interact with and impact Power Pages. Second, if you're familiar with building and managing Power Pages, but you're less experienced with writing plugins, this presentation will help give you insights into how plugins can extend the functionality of your Power Pages site, adding powerful custom logic that will enhance the user experience. So we'll be exploring how plugins and Power Pages interact, what sort of challenges might arise, particularly around caching, and how to address these challenges effectively. So before we go into how DataVerse plugins interact with Power Pages, let's start with a quick overview of what DataVerse plugins are and why they're so crucial to extending the functionality of your applications. So at their core, DataVerse plugins are pieces of custom business logic that are executed in response to specific events within the DataVerse environment. These events could be something like creating a new record, updating an existing one, deleting a record, or even retrieving information. Essentially, anytime data operations occur, plugins have the potential to modify or extend what happens during those operations. Plugins are used in a variety of scenarios. For example, they're great for automating business processes. Imagine a scenario where every time a new lead record is created, you want to automatically assign it to a specific salesperson, based on some certain criteria. And a plugin can handle that assignment logic. Plugins are also powerful tools for data validation and transformation. If you need to ensure that data conforms to specific rules before it's saved into the database, or if you need to transform data in some way before it's actually committed to the database, plugins provide the perfect mechanism for that. So let's talk about some of the key concepts that are central to working with DataVerse plugins. First is the execution pipeline. When you write a plugin, you decide when it should run in the context of the data operation. So there's three main modes. We have pre-validation, pre-operation, and post-operation. Each stage allows you to influence the data at different points in the operation lifecycle. Another critical concept is the distinction between synchronous and asynchronous execution. Synchronous plugins run immediately during the operation, meaning they can influence the outcome of the operation right away. However, because they run in real time, they can also slow down the operation if they involve complex logic. Asynchronous plugins, on the other hand, run after the operation has completed, which can be beneficial for non-critical tasks that don't need to block the main process, but they can introduce a delay in when their effects are visible in the system. So understanding these core concepts is crucial because they determine how your custom logic will interact with the broader DataVerse ecosystem, especially when you're working with Power Pages. So I'm going to be switching over to my Visual Studio interface here, and I'll be showing you the plugin that I'll be demonstrating today. So I built it specifically for this presentation, and at a high level, what it's doing is triggering off of a table column that I created called test column. And I created a custom table called test table, which you'll see when I demonstrate the Power Pages site. And so when this test column gets updated, it will update two columns, one on a form and another not on the form. Respectfully, they're named columns test column 2 and test column 3, as we can see here on line 60 and 61. And you can see here on those two lines, I'm setting those two columns to the current date time. And then I'm just simply updating that record, the record that got triggered. And so that is the plugin that I'll be showing you today and how this will impact the Power Pages based on the stuff that I previously mentioned. So let's jump back to the slides real quick. So now that we've covered kind of the basics of DataVerse plugins, let's shift our focus to Power Pages. This is especially important because understanding how Power Pages work is key to seeing the full picture of how your plugins can influence web-based user experiences. Power Pages is a powerful platform for building secure, external-facing websites that integrate seamlessly with DataVerse. Essentially, if you need to create a web portal for your customers, partners, or even internal users that interact with your DataVerse data, Power Pages is the tool for the job. So what makes Power Pages stand out is its ability to expose DataVerse data to users in a controlled and secure manner, allowing you to create customized web experiences that are tightly coupled with your backend data. So let's talk about some of the core features that make Power Pages an essential part of the Microsoft Power Platform. First and foremost is its secure data access and management. Power Pages can ensure that only authorized users can access or manipulate data, which is crucial when you're dealing with sensitive or business-critical information. Another key feature is the platform's low-code/no-code development environment. This allows developers and even business users to create and manage web pages with minimal coding effort, speeding up the development process and enabling quicker iterations. Power Pages offers rich design and customization options that can be extended further with custom code, making it versatile for both simple and complex applications. So why should you, as a plugin developer, care about Power Pages? Well, the answer lies in the impact your plugins can have on the web user experience. When your plugins modify or manage data in DataVerse, these changes can be directly reflected on a web page. This means that the logic you implement in your plugins can shape how users interact with your website in real time. Understanding Power Pages is not just about knowing how to build a website, it's about understanding how your plugins can extend beyond DataVerse and influence the front-end user experience. This is where the power of integrating these two technologies really shine. So with a solid understanding of both DataVerse plugins and Power Pages, it's time to explore how these two components interact. This connection is where the real power and complexity of your applications can come into play. So let's start by discussing how plugins can influence the behavior of Power Pages. When you have a plugin that manipulates data in DataVerse, whether it's creating, updating, or deleting records, those changes can be directly reflected on your Power Pages site. For example, if your plugin updates a contact's information, that updated data can immediately appear on a web page that displays contact details. So this is especially important in real-time scenarios where users expect the most up-to-date information. However, the timing of these updates depend heavily on whether your plugin is running synchronously or asynchronously. Synchronous plugins will reflect changes in real time, ensuring that the data presented to the user is always current. Asynchronous plugins, however, might introduce that delay as the update happens in the background after the initial operation has completed. So when working with plugins and Power Pages, there are a few key considerations to keep in mind. So firstly, ensuring data consistency is crucial. You need to be aware of the potential for discrepancies between what's stored in DataVerse and what's displayed on your Power Pages site, especially when using asynchronous plugins. So secondly, think about the user experience implication. Real-time updates via synchronous plugins generally lead to a smoother, more responsive experience for users. However, synchronous operation can also slow down performance, so you'll need to balance responsiveness with the system's overall efficiency. These scenarios and considerations highlight the importance of understanding not just how plugins work in isolation, but how they affect the entire user experience when integrated with Power Pages. So now that we've covered the fundamentals of how plugins interact with Power Pages, let's take a closer look at when and why you might choose to use plugins in this context. Plugins are a powerful tool, but they should be used strategically to solve specific challenges that can't be easily addressed through client-side code or configuration alone. One of the primary reasons to use plugins is to handle complex server-side business logic. There are certain situations where operations need to be performed on the server rather than on the client. For example, if you need to perform a series of operations that involve multiple tables, or if you need to ensure that certain actions occur in a specific sequence, plugins are your go-to solution. Plugins are also invaluable when you need to perform actions that aren't feasible or secure to implement in JavaScript. Since plugins run on the server, they offer a more secure environment, ensuring that critical logic is executed reliably and is not vulnerable to tampering by users. Another key use case for plugins is advanced validation. While basic validations can be handled on the client side with JavaScript, there are scenarios where server-side validation is essential. For instance, you might need to validate data against external systems, perform some complex calculations, or enforce business rules that require access to sensitive information. Now, with plugins, you can throw exceptions when validation fails. And if you enable the appropriate site setting, which is called site/enable custom plugin error, these exceptions will be displayed directly to your users. This ensures that users are informed immediately if their input doesn't meet the required criteria, enhancing the overall user experience. Plugins are also commonly used for creating or modifying related records automatically when a specific action occurs. For example, if a user submits a form on a web page, you might want to automatically create an associated record in a different table or update related records based on that submission. Plugins can make this process seamless and efficient, allowing you to implement complex workflows and automation that would be difficult or somewhat impossible to achieve with client-side code alone. So in summary, plugins are most often used with Power Pages when you need to perform server-side operations that ensure data integrity, enforce complex business rules, or automate related record management. By strategically using plugins in these scenarios, you can create robust, secure, and efficient applications that provide a seamless experience for your users. So now let's talk about some of the caching challenges with plugins and Power Pages. So understanding how caching works and how it interacts with plugins is crucial for designing high performance and reliable applications. So first, let's talk about why caching is important. Caching improves the performance of Power Pages by temporarily storing data, which reduces the load on the server and speeds up data retrieval for users. However, this also introduces challenges, particularly when it comes to ensuring that users always see the most current data. it's important to understand that cache invalidation in Power Pages happens automatically in three main ways. Microsoft highlights that even if no changes are made, the cache will be cleared, which can take up to 15 minutes, but it's usually much less than that, like around 2 to 3 minutes. And also, any create, update, or delete action on the website by any user will automatically clear the cache for that specific table and related tables. And during development, you can manually clear the cache, but this wouldn't be an option in production states. One crucial point to understand is that plugins themselves do not invalidate the cache. This is a key distinction. When your plugin updates data in DataVerse, it doesn't automatically trigger cache invalidation. Instead, you must design your systems with this in mind. So this is where understanding the difference between synchronous and asynchronous plugins become critical. So for synchronous plugins, since they run immediately during the operation, the data they update will be available the next time it's queried, reducing the likelihood of displaying stale data. Asynchronous plugins, on the other hand, run after the operation completes, and there's no guarantee of when they will finish. This can lead to scenarios where data is recached before the asynchronous operation has run. So now I'm going to be demonstrating, the difference in user experience between synchronous and asynchronous plugins based on the previous statements I just mentioned. So we're going to start with a synchronous plugin and how that affects the Power Pages user experience. So I'm just going to briefly open up the XRM toolbox here, and I'm just going to make sure that my plugin is set to synchronous mode here. So we can see here, this is my Portals Community Call plugin, which is registered to my environment. And then I'm just going to hit on the update step here. So we can see here, these are the different stages, and then my execution mode is set to synchronous. So we now verified that my plugin is triggered on my test column, and it's also set to synchronous. So I'm just going to hit cancel here. So we verified that, and now I'm just going to pull up my Power Pages site quickly here. I'll drag this over. All right, so here we can see we're on my Power Pages site, and we are on my list records of my test table with my test table records. So I'm just going to go and edit this record here that I have, which is called test record. I'm just going to click on the dropdown and hit the edit button, which will direct me to a different web page of an edit form submission. So what I'm going to be doing here is going to be triggering the plugin by updating this specific test column. So I'll just call it test2. And then the expected output is that I'm going to see an immediate change in test column 2 to the current date time. So if I hit submit now, it's going to process. And then we can see here, it redirects me back to the same web page with the same query string. And we can see here that the date timestamp is updated. And this is coming from the plugin. So now I'm going to go back into the XRM toolbox again and go and update this to an asynchronous mode. And then we'll see what happens then. So I just change this to async. We'll update this. Let me go back to my Power Pages site. So now that I've updated that plugin to be registered as an asynchronous operation, I'm going to do the same sort of thing just by updating this test column here and then hitting the submit and then seeing what happens. So you can see here, I updated the test column, but we're still seeing that same date time that was previously there. And we can see that, due to that asynchronous nature of the plugin, it introduces that slight delay since the plugin fires after the operation has completed, and there's no guarantee of when that will finish. So if I go back to slides here. So given these challenges, how should we design our systems to minimize the negative impact of caching? So if you have a plugin that runs asynchronously, you should design your flows to avoid immediately querying the updated data. For instance, instead of redirecting users to a list page that shows newly created or updated records right after an asynchronous plugin runs, consider redirecting them to an intermediate page, like a thank you page or something to that effect. This would give the plugin time to complete its work before the user returns to the data list. So I'll be demonstrating some of that behavior. So I'm going to bring back my Power Pages site, and then let's go back to that list records list. And I'm going to create a brand new record, and I'm going to have it redirect to the same list that we see right here. So I'm going to create a record. We'll just call it test record 2. And then we'll call this test 1. And then we'll just set my contact, hit select. And then if I hit submit, we'll have it redirect back to the same list, but we can see here we don't see the changes made from the plugin. And the changes aren't immediately visible because we can't guarantee when that will finish executing. So as an improved user experience, let's change the redirect to a thank you page. So I'm going to go to my Power Pages Management model-driven app, and on the basic form for my test table form create, I'm just going to simply switch the redirect to a different web page. So if we go to the on success settings here, we can see here the redirect is set to the same, it's set to that list view. So instead of this, we can change this to a thank you page. And we'll just save this. And then I'm going to go and just manually clear the cache so we can demonstrate this behavior. So if I just refresh this, and I'll do the same sort of thing, but we should see a different experience now. So I'll create another record. So let's call it test record 3. Call this test 1. Contact, we'll set this. And then I'll hit submit. And now what I should be seeing is we aren't going back to that list view page. We've now gone to a thank you page, which is just a simple page that says thank you for your submission. And so by the time the user would navigate back to their list of records, hopefully that plugin would have finished its operation. Now, this would take some time to complete, so I'm not going to wait until it finishes, but that is how we can design around caching in Power Pages effectively. So remember, once data is cached, the only way to see updated information is to wait for the automatic refresh, which can take up to 15 minutes, but usually it's around a couple minutes or so, or for another user action that triggers cache invalidation. As developers, we need to work within these constraints to design systems that minimize the impact of these limitations. So by understanding how caching works in Power Pages and how it interacts with plugins, you can better design your applications to provide a seamless user experience while avoiding the pitfalls of stale data. So, as I wrap up my presentation, let's take a moment to recap the key concepts we've covered and highlight some best practices you should keep in mind when working with DataVerse plugins and Power Pages. First, we discussed DataVerse plugins, focusing on the differences between synchronous and asynchronous execution. Understanding these differences is crucial because they directly affect how data gets updated and are processed and reflected on Power Pages. Next, we explored Power Pages, emphasizing their role in providing real-time data integration with DataVerse. We saw how Power Pages can deliver dynamic, data-driven content to users, but also how they can be impacted by the behavior of your plugins, especially in relation to caching. Finally, we took a deep dive into the caching challenges that arise when combining plugins with Power Pages. We discussed how caching can lead to stale data being presented to users and explored some strategies to mitigate these issues. So in conclusion, mastering the interaction between DataVerse plugins and Power Pages is key to building robust, high-performing applications. as developers, it's important to understand not just how each component works in isolation, but how they can influence each other when integrated. So yes, that concludes my presentation for today. Thank you for your attention. Thank you, Nick, and thank you, Jason, for having me today. I hope this presentation, has provided you with some valuable insights into effectively managing the challenges and opportunities that come with integrating DataVerse plugins and Power Pages.
Awesome. Thank you, Jacob. Yeah, anytime you get to talk about caching, it's always a
It's
fun thing.
always
And
fun.
I know Jacob and I have been we've been bouncing ideas off of each other, and based on kind of the work that Jacob has done, that's going to influence some of. I've got a few new Power Pages tips coming up here that are all talking about caching. So it was definitely a good opportunity for us to look into or to dive deeper into caching. We did have one question that kind of came up as you were presenting. It says, can you give some examples of a use case where Dataverse plugins can be used instead of flows or business rules? They said they just want to understand how plugins are different than using flows or business rules. Oh, sorry. I think Jacob, I'm not hearing
Oh,
your
sorry.
audio.
Oh, there we
Yep.
go.
Yep.
Sorry, I just had to pull up the question here. Dataverse plugins can be instead of. So I'm assuming it's like flows. Like, are you meaning like Power Automate flows or classic work
I would assume, yeah, Power Automate flows. Yeah.
Power Automate flows? Okay. Um, so with Power Automate flows, by design, all Power Automate flows are um, asynchronous. And so if you have a plugin, you can set that to synchronous, and that would be the reason why I would have a Dataverse plugin instead of a Cloudflow. And business rules, from my knowledge, aren't available on Power Pages. Um, I think we resort to JavaScript in that regard. But I hope that answers that question. Instead
Yeah,
of
I
a
think the only business rules that in theory you can set some at if you set them at the table level, you can have some business rules that run server side, so those can impact data being put into Power Pages. But the kind of more business rules in their traditional sense, where it's impacting like validation, say on the form, those don't apply to Power Pages. So yes, flows, Power Automate flows being asynchronous, they're kind of similar to asynchronous plugins. Plugins are really the domain of that pro code C# developer. So some people, a lot of times, it just comes down to like what someone's comfortable with. There are often many ways to solve the same problem, and people often kind of resort to whatever they're most comfortable with. So it's like for me, um, I'm a developer originally. That's kind of where the angle I usually come from. So I don't mind writing a plugin. Other people, can't or don't want to write plugins, and that's fine. And so maybe they'll use a classic workflow or they'll use the Power Automate flow. But yeah, the big challenge with Power Automate flows when it comes to Power Pages is the caching. So some of the techniques, or the idea of having that synchronous plugin that isn't as susceptible to caching issues, that's unfortunately not an option with Power Automate flows. Maybe someday we'll get true synchronous. There are some, like, if you call a flow using the Power Pages web API, it is synchronous, but that does not invalidate the cache in the same way that an update operation would do. But yeah, I know people have been asking ever since like Power Automate, has come around. People have been asking, well, when will it be synchronous? It's Yeah. So I don't have the answer. I don't know if there is an answer to that, whether it will or whether it won't, and if it will, how far away are we from that? Um, but that would be kind of the big challenge with the Power Automate flows. All right. Again, thank you, Jacob. Yeah, plugins with Power Pages. There's lots of interesting things that you can accomplish with them. Again, the caching is usually the tricky part, but it's just another tool that can be added to the toolbox of a Power Pages developer. Just keeping in mind that Power Pages is built on top of DataVerse. So if something that exists in DataVerse, there's a good chance that you can leverage it on your Power Pages site, and that's what we're seeing here today with the plugins. That plugins, they are completely DataVerse, or they're a DataVerse concept, but they apply to Power Pages. Another thing that hasn't been mentioned yet is if you are developing plugins, just know that there was an update, in the last couple of years to how plugins operate in terms of the plugin context that's passed to you. If it's coming from Power Pages, you can get some additional context about the user that is calling that particular plugin. And by user, I mean the actual contact on Power Pages. So you can tell within your plugin if it was called from Power Pages, and if so, who was the contact from Power Pages. So there's a bit of a new special functionality that's tied directly to Power Pages in the plugin. So something to be aware of if you've maybe been writing plugins for years for kind of Dynamics 365, Dynamics CRM, that sort of thing. There is that kind of extra, little bit of bonus for Power Pages where you can tell who was the, which contact was it that made that particular operation. So, all right, I am going to take the screen back. Make presenter. And I will share my screen again here. That one there. All right. So, so please, if you do still have any other questions on that topic or anything in Power Pages, feel free to drop those down in the questions area. But in the meantime, our next call, as I mentioned, it's going to be a little bit of a different. Usually we do it on Thursdays, usually like the last or second last Thursday of the month. But we did have some conflicts there, and our kind of normal slot was right in the middle of Power Platform Conference, and so everyone's kind of busy with that. So we didn't want to conflict with that. So what we're doing is we're doing it on a Friday. We're going to do a little bit earlier on in the day. So we're going to do it at 12 p.m. Eastern time, 9 a.m. Pacific. So 4 p.m. UTC time, so everyone can do their math and figure out what that means in their time zone. Yeah, so that is the plan for September, is to do it on September 27th, which is a Friday at 12 p.m. Eastern time. All right. So again, want to say thanks to Jason and the team at MS Dynamics World for all of their support. And we can leave this open for another couple minutes if there are any questions. I don't see any additional questions right now. But if you do, now's the time to get them in there. Otherwise, we will wrap it up for the day. And as always, if you do have any topics that you think should be covered, whether it's in our community calls or our tips, we do have a way to submit that feedback on the Engineered Code website. So if there are topics that you'd really love to see covered, please do that. To be honest with you, when it comes to like the video tips, we're up. I think I was just recording tips 285, 286, and 287 earlier this week. So we're almost at 300 tips, and one of the things I struggle with the most is, what topic have I not covered yet? So if you do have any feedback or there are any particular topics that you want covered, those, it's always kind of appreciated, and it's always nice to actually do some tips that people want versus just kind of making it up. So. All right, I'm not seeing any questions. So Jason, I think we can wrap it up there today.
All right, we'll do that. Thanks, everyone. Great job to our presenters, and we will be following up with the recording soon. Have a great day, everybody.
Thanks, everyone.